if the arrangement politically that we were actually in studio when it happened, the handshake.
Yes.
Much as it's probably not envisioned in the Constitution,
Yes.
was it unconstitutional? But it's something that led to settlement.
Well, you could argue it led to something, some sort of, and I think this is where the current president calls it a mongrel. Nobody knew what it was. All of a sudden, the people who were in the opposition, they were making decisions that were in government. I mean, who can forget when the cost of living, people are yelling everywhere, the cost of living. And it was the Honorable Raila Odinga. The same thing he's talking about today of the cost of living. When people asked him that, and I remember you actually captured it in his house, and Honorable Martha Karua was seated next to him. When he was asked about the cost of living, what did he tell people? No, cost of fuel, oh, these are external factors. And you guys, muache kubweka. You know, he's remembered for those words because he felt he was within government at that time. All his political ducks were swimming in a row. And so it would be actually offensive if you were to say or to tell Kenyans, let's have another handshake. I don't think that's the cure. If you are telling me to really face the ultimate solution, Mark, which I believe is wholeheartedly, this is where the solution lies. Back in the day, Mark, during Moi's time and probably Kibaki's, when you lost an election, the one thing that used to come to mind, Mark, oh man, our area will be so underdeveloped, we won't get roads, we won't get what. Devolution came to cure something. I really hope we would have understood, or I really pray that at some point, Mark, we are going to understand what devolution is all about. Because the Constitution guarantees that this area cannot be left behind. And those even who are left behind, there's a chunk of money that is entitled to them. So there is one huge aspect of underdevelopment, you know, that was cured. The only other thing that now we are fighting to cure is creating a crisis to point to the Constitution as having a constitutional crisis, because that's the only thing we can do. If you tell me that what we are having can be cured by President William Ruto having another handshake with Honorable Raila Odinga, then I'll tell you, then President Ruto was the biggest liar, because he told us the handshake back then was a mongrel, that in fact all major issues started when there was a handshake. And to an extent you can point some of the things which probably would have not gone on had probably Honorable Raila Odinga been in an office where he's able to veto some things directly using his members of parliament. And that's why I'm agreeing with Mark. So if you get another handshake, this person enjoys government, who will hold government to account? You see, and that's why I'm saying that is not the cure per se. Okay. If you are saying if you're telling the framers of the Constitution, get the likes of Akina Mark and other people to say, how do we craft this office? How will the new office of Honorable Raila Odinga in Parliament look like? That is a conversation I think Kenyans may want to have. But run away. Let's give chance to this document, which the same very person we are talking about fought for it. Why can we not allow it to work? If we believe that the institutions that were created, the Supreme Court, all these institutions that were created by this Constitution, if we so much believe in this Constitution, why are we not going to allow them to work? That in every place you lose, you must point fault at that very institution. Yeah? Well, with Mark here, when people are sleeping in the streets after 2013, 2017, same thing. Move these guys out of office. Bring in new people. New people come in. You still lose. Change the people in that office. Put this back. So we've not cured anything. But I would agree with Mark. If we are having a narrative, if we are having a conversation where we are saying, how can we have this office of the leader of opposition given much power to put the government of the day in check, even to an extent of calling cabinet secretaries and their PSs? That is something Kenyans actually can be grateful for. And I think if we are so dear to this great country that we love, those are some of the conversations that we should be having.
You know, we must be clear that in this constitutional holiness that we're trying to pursue, there is today in this country the office of a prime cabinet secretary.
Right.
It is not a constitutional office. Correct. It exists. I have no problem with it. because I supported the idea of having a prime minister long before. So I don't switch positions based on who is in power. Politics is the art of what is possible. That's what politics is. The United States, which arguably was one of the first countries to have a constitution, amended that constitution 2-3 years after, right? When you realize there is a problem, the constitution itself envisions that the people who are sovereign, either through their representatives in parliament or by referendum, can express themselves.
Yeah.
Let us not treat the idea of amending our constitution as inherently evil. That's something we must change. At the same time, we must also remember that President William Ruto, in looking at his government and his political future, appointed 50 CASs, who the courts deemed illegal.
Yeah.
Right? That process, what was it? It was a political process. We as a country need to stop hearing the other side with a bias. We need to stop looking at the problems of this country as though they're snapshots frozen in time. We need to think 20, 30 years ahead. And 20, 30 years ahead, the issue of one man, 1 shilling, 1 vote will be a big issue. It will be a big issue because the population over here in Central is underrepresented, whether you want to count by MPs or in terms of funds they receive. Completely underrepresented. I am not a Kikuyu, so I'm not defending my people. The issues of devolution, for example, the amount of money allocated to devolution versus national government. Let's look at the housing fund, 1.5% going to national government, yet housing is a devolved function. These are the issues we need to discuss without looking at them as though it is enmity. The other thing we need to agree to is this country requires leaders who speak peaceably, not only to each other, but to this country.
Okay.
When we live in a country where a cabinet secretary can use words I can't use, we are heading in the wrong direction. Because what we are doing is we are creating an enmity culture.
Yeah.
And at some point, what we say will turn into what we do. Those are the issues we need to address.
Okay.
Forget about the political colors we want to put, or who's sponsoring Mandamano, or this person, or that person. Stop individualizing the problems we have in this country.